On my first day home for the summer from law school, my aunts informed me I was escorting them to an open house being held by the Parkers, our new next-door neighbors. I would have much preferred to sleep because I hadn't done a lot of it lately, but my not-so-discreet protestations were summarily ignored. So, at 6 p.m. on Friday evening, I was dressed in charcoal gray slacks, blue blazer, white, button-down shirt and a silk Brooks Brothers tie. My stubble had been banished. My black loafers gleamed. "You do clean up nicely, Jimmy," Aunt Dorothy said admiringly as she looked me up and down. "You're quite a handsome man," Aunt Linda said, beaming up at me. "I'd better be to escort two such beautiful ladies," I replied. Aunt Linda giggled. "Background," Aunt Dorothy said. "He is Dr. Arthur Parker, renowned as a surgeon, pompous ass, and self-proclaimed God's gift to women. She's Amanda, his trophy wife." "She's a cool customer," Aunt Linda added. "Kids?" I asked. "His are grown, and they don't have any," Aunt Dorothy replied. "The Warners will be there, but Julie's back to being a loyal wife, so cool it." "Simon still doesn't know Julie and I had an affair?" I asked. "No, he doesn't," Aunt Dorothy said. "And he doesn't know about Julie and Dorothy either," Aunt Linda added, giving Aunt Dorothy the evil eye. Aunt Dorothy reddened and changed the subject. "Here." She handed me a bottle of Silver Oak Cabernet with a bow around its neck. "Carry the housewarming gift. Come on. Let's go." Aunt Dorothy led the way out the front door, and I brought up the rear as I followed them down the sidewalk and across to the house next door. The Millers from across the street joined us as we walked up the Parkers' sidewalk toward their open door. Dorothy Nelson, my mother's younger sister and only sibling, took me in and became my legal guardian when my parents were killed in an automobile accident. She was 25 and a year out of nursing school. I was a lad of 10. Only a few months later, Linda Connell, 23, graduated from college with a teaching degree and moved in with us. She wasn't really my aunt, but calling her aunt was a convenience. They raised me with all the love and attention a young man could want. Our house was in an upscale neighborhood near the downtown area where older homes were being demolished and new mansions being built for the doctors, lawyers, and other yuppies. Ours was one of the best of the earlier construction and impeccably maintained. The Parker home was one of the new ones, almost gaudy in appearance. As we queued in the reception line, I got my first look at Amanda Parker. She stood next to her husband, smiling woodenly as she met Mr. and Mrs. Miller. Amanda was a cool, classy beauty with long, loose curls of strawberry blonde dyed hair framing a square-shaped face, a full mouth, clear complexion, and eyes of seafoam green in a lightly tanned face. When the Millers stepped to the left, I saw the rest of her. She wore a white, backless cocktail dress with a square, halter-style bodice that tied behind her neck and low on her back. The dress, made of a slinky, clinging material, fell to mid-thigh. It was the perfect dress to display, in a socially acceptable manner, the perfect figure. Her white open-toed, sling-back pumps with a 5-inch high heel brought her to about 6 feet, her husband's height. There was a solitaire diamond dangling from a gold choker around her neck and an anklet around her right ankle. Then Mrs. Parker noticed me. Her body language clearly said she liked what she saw. Aunt Linda went first in the reception line, then Aunt Dorothy, who introduced me to Dr. Parker, a beefy and florid man nearing 60. The word pompous fit him to a T. He turned slightly and introduced me to his wife before turning his attention to the people behind me. Obviously, my pedigree wasn't enough to hold his attention. When I shook Amanda's hand, electricity flickered up my arm. Her eyes, no longer wooden, sparkled at me. I handed her the bottle of wine. "Thank you, Jim. I'm happy to meet you," she said with more warmth than a bottle of wine deserved. The party was in full swing. I worked my way through the crowd talking to neighbors I seldom saw anymore. Some of my friends were there, either home from school as I was, or working in the city and back in the neighborhood to see old faces. I did visit with Simon and Julie, who stopped for a short but pleasant conversation. I was in the backyard talking with a group of 4 when I saw Amanda working her way through the crowd, playing hostess as she talked to her guests. She watched me surreptitiously from the corner of her eye, and it wasn't long before she joined us. We made small talk for a few minutes before I excused myself to go to the bar. I joined another group, visited with them, and waited. Once again, Amanda joined us. We all had a pleasant visit before she left to mingle with her guests. By then, I had received enough signs, signals if you will, from the wife of Dr. Parker to know she wanted me. I don't mean to sound cocky, or, heavens forbid, pompous like her husband, but I was not mistaken. She was a woman men pursue with wild abandon, hurling platitudes and diamonds like spears and laying roses in her path. I'm sure she had been fighting them off since puberty, so her instincts were trained to be wary. Her position as the trophy of a wealthy man doubled her need for discretion and increased her anxiety. So my pursuit of her, or my surrender to her after her pursuit, if you will, would be a little game of cat and mouse I believed I'd find most enjoyable. I rejoined my aunts who were on the patio talking to the Solomons, who lived in the next block. We were discussing the stock market when I felt a tug on my coat sleeve. I turned to face a young woman who was only 5'6" or so, even in her heels. She had bright, bleach blonde hair that fell straight, almost to her waist, far too much makeup, and she wore skin-tight, black leather pants encasing a well-shaped ass with a black leather halter top that was losing the battle to contain her chest. Her midriff was bare, and her navel piercing held a dangling diamond. Jim Mi Johnson. Remember me? I saw the barbell in her tongue when she spoke. Cheyenne Young. My, but you're growing up. I go to college in the fall. Come talk to me, she said, taking my hand. She led the way, first to the bar to refresh our drinks where she got a rum and coke and I got a light scotch and water, and then to the far corner of the backyard where we sat on a bench under a magnolia tree. I sat facing the house and her. As Cheyenne and I talked, she batted her eyelashes and gave me plenty of looks down her cleavage. She kept her firm thigh pressed against mine and initiated our hand-holding. Cheyenne had grown up in the neighborhood, and she'd had a crush on me since she was 8. She'd be easy pickings. Too easy. But I always liked her, and she had developed nicely, so I didn't want to be rude. We had been on the bench about 30 minutes when Aunt Linda joined us. Dorothy and I are ready to go, Jimmy, she said. I stood and Cheyenne stood with me, holding tightly to my hand. I said to her, when will you be 18? I am now, she lied. Then she deflated. She knew I knew how old she was. After you're 18, I'll call you, I said. In the meantime, be sweet. I kissed her lightly on the lips, squeezed her hand, and left her there. I enjoyed Cheyenne. She didn't give me the brainless bimbo act she used on kids her own age. But I'd spent that much time with her because of the effect our visit was having on Amanda Parker. She had kept an eye on us like a jealous wife. Aunt Linda and I worked our way back through the crowd, saying our goodbyes to friends old and new, and easing Aunt Dorothy out of a heated discussion. We were almost to the front door when Amanda stepped in front of me. Leaving so soon, she asked me. With all these guests, you'll hardly miss us, I said. I wouldn't say that. I saw you with that girl, and I was hoping for equal time. I leaned forward and whispered in her ear. Cheyenne is unattached and you're spoken for. She started to say something but bit her tongue. Her face changed back to the happy but wooden hostess. Well, we certainly enjoyed having you here. Come back again soon. I escorted my aunts to our house. Aunt Linda went straight to their bedroom, no doubt to shed her high heels as she never enjoyed wearing them. Aunt Dorothy went to the bar. Something else, Jimmy, she called out. Thanks, but I'll pass, I said. I plopped down on the couch in the living room, kicked off my loafers, and put my feet on the coffee table. With a highball glass in her hand, Aunt Dorothy sat down beside me. So, stud, she said. Which one are you going to be F first? I grinned but didn't speak. Cheyenne would have done you on the spot if you'd asked her. Aunt Dorothy took a sip. Did you make a date with her? I still think she's 8 with pigtails and 2 teeth missing, I replied. I thought I raised you better than that, Jimmy. That is not the body of an 8-year-old. I told her I'd call her when she's 18. That's only in, 4 months. But that's not the real reason you put Cheyenne off, is it? Aunt Dorothy said. Meaning? Meaning Amanda Parker, the trophy wife. She is a beauty, isn't she? Yes, she is, I replied, and a picture of Amanda filled my mind. Aunt Dorothy watched me intently when I lamely smiled at her. She couldn't take her eyes off of you either. You know the wonderful doctor is gone all day, and she's alone most of the time. I didn't reply. Aunt Dorothy took another sip of her scotch and soda and said, my guess is you'll have her by Friday. This Friday? Wow, you do have a lot of confidence in me, I exclaimed. Ido. And I know she's very unhappy. She's not like me, Jimmy. You know how I treasure my independence. I nodded. Aunt Dorothy continued. She likes belonging to a man and all that it means, but Arthur is a fool. He really does treat her like she's a slave girl in his harem, either ignoring her or showing her off like she's a brainless Barbie doll. No one likes that, and Amanda is certainly no exception. Did you see that diamond ring on her finger? How could I miss it? I said. 3 carats at least. It's quite a rock. Your problem is she won't do anything to endanger her meal ticket. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Dr. Arthur Angus Parker is a pig who requires regular you-know-what from an office clerk I know in order to keep her job. A pig who has hit on both Linda and me. Aunt Dorothy. I do believe you're blushing. Tell me all about it, I demanded. You know I didn't give in, she said pointedly, emphasizing the I. But Aunt Linda did? He caught her at a weak moment, and that's all I'm going to say. I waited. It wasn't long before she continued. I will tell you this. He is one hell of a seducer, smooth as silk. She said he was good but not nearly as good as you are. She downed her drink, sat the tumbler noisily on the table, and stood. She kissed me on the forehead, rumpled my hair, and said, "It's bedtime for me. Lock everything up, will you, honey?" "Sure, Aunt Dorothy. Good night." I haven't said enough about my dear Aunt Dorothy. She's only 15 years older than I am, younger than my dead mother by 6 years. She is smart and intelligent. She has a good sense of humor and a backbone of steel. She's an attractive woman, tall and slender, with great legs and smallish chest. Her black hair is kept short as she hates to spend time on it. Her eyes, like mine and my mother's, are a rich, bright blue. She was 38, still in the prime of her womanhood. She and Aunt Linda taught me the difference between you-know-what and love and how they fit together. Aunt Dorothy would talk to me about anything, anytime, being open and honest. Sometimes, she was a little too clinical, but she was a nurse. She taught me about you-know-what. I don't mean Aunt Dorothy F me. She had said, "I'm a lesbian, Jimmy. Ilikiman. I just don't like to have it with them. But even if I like to do it, I wouldn't do it with you because you're my nephew and I'm your aunt and your legal guardian, so quit getting every time you look at me." Aunt Linda was an entirely different matter. She was bi, and she wasn't really my aunt. She was as attractive as Aunt Dorothy, but shorter, less extrovert, and more passive. She had a sweet demeanor and a soft, womanly body. Men were attracted to her, but she usually told them no. She had had an 8-year-long affair with a married teacher at her school. Because he was married, their time together was sporadic. It was the way she preferred it. She was in the relationship for the you-know-what just like he was. Aunt Linda was the woman I first held in my arms. Together, she and Aunt Dorothy taught me what women like and want and need, how to please and do the thing and eat and stroke and tease them until they begged. Neither of my aunts would ever marry. As Aunt Dorothy said, if they needed a man for they could find one. For love they had each other, sleeping together in a queen-sized bed in the master bedroom. I awakened early the next morning, slipped out of bed, and put on my boxer shorts before padding toward the smell of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen. Aunt Linda, in a revealing knee-length nightgown, was sitting at the kitchen table reading the morning paper. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Just fine." I kissed her on the mouth and poured myself a full mug of her strong brew. "How about you?" "Wonderful as always, but I was thinking of a nap this afternoon," she said. "That sounds good. Maybe you could join me," she said, with a reddish tinge in her cheeks. "I'd love to." I never approached Aunt Linda. She always approached me. That arrangement had worked out just fine. I finished my coffee and read the sports page before changing into my running gear and hitting the road like I did 5 or 6 mornings a week. As I jogged the familiar streets near home, the air was cool and only slightly damp. After my run, I walked the final half block to cool down. I was opening my front door when a voice called out, "Jim." It was Amanda with my billfold in her hand. I had intentionally left it at the Parker house to see how it would get returned. She was wearing Bermuda shorts, sandals, and an expensive, tasteful blouse. She looked good, very good. As I watched her cross the yard toward me, I realized where I'd seen that walk. It was the straight-backed promenade beauty pageant contestants use when they walk across the stage. When she got to my house, I wished her good morning, invited her in, and closed the door behind her. She handed me the billfold and said, "This must have slipped out of your pocket last night." "Must have. Thanks for bringing it over." She was on edge. "Arthur is leaving for a conference in Boston in the morning. He won't be back until Wednesday," she said. "He's not taking you?" "He never does," she said. "That's too bad." "Well, thanks for bringing this over. I know you've got things to do." She bristled. My guess was in Amanda Parker's experience, men did not dismiss women like her, unless they were married to her. Rather, they curried her favor to bask in the sunshine of her beauty. She was on shaky ground having to pursue instead of being pursued. She started to speak and her hands rose to touch me, but when her fingers brushed my arms, she dropped them to her side and blushed. I purposely brushed my hand against her as I opened the door. She turned and was against me, her expression said, "Kiss me," but I didn't. I smiled and opened the door. She looked confused as she stepped out onto the porch. "Have a good day," I said as I closed the door behind her. I went to my bedroom and hooked up my computer that I'd brought home from school. I checked my email and played around for a little while before eating lunch with my aunts. Over a tuna fish sandwich, Aunt Dorothy produced a honey-do list that would keep me busy most of the summer. I didn't run Sunday morning. In fact, I didn't get out of bed until 10 when my 2 dear aunts demanded I take them to lunch. "Nothing fancy, Jimmy. Just Matthew's Grill," Aunt Dorothy said. "Ah, Matthew's Grill. The best eggs in the world. And the best coffee." I had a grilled T-bone, 4 fried eggs, hash browns, biscuits, and coffee. I forgot how much he can eat, Aunt Linda said to Aunt Dorothy as I finished up the last of my feast. An hour or so later, I went out back to start the yard work. I wore standard yard work attire, old shorts, an old t-shirt, and tennis shoes. By 2, I was mowing the front lawn. Amanda Parker watched me from her kitchen window. I pretended I didn't see her. Soon, she came outside and pretended to examine her flowers. I killed the lawnmower engine and wiped my face on my shirt. "Hi, Jim," she said brightly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Sure is," I replied. "You look like you need a break." "Want some lemonade?" she asked. "That'd be nice," I said. "Come on over." She turned and headed for her front door. She wasn't dressed for yard work. She wore skin-tight shorts, a halter top, and mules with 3-inch heels. Her hair was in a ponytail. The rock was on her finger, the choker and solitaire around her neck, and the chain around her ankle. I followed her enticing sway through her front door, which I shut behind me, and into her kitchen where a large crystal pitcher full of lemonade sat on a silver tray. A small silver candy dish piled with Pepperidge Farm's Milano cookies sat beside it. "Did you get your hubby off to Boston?" I asked. 11:30 flight, she replied. "Have a seat." I sat at the kitchen table. She sat in the chair nearest me, turned it to face me, and crossed her legs, right over left. They were great legs. "So, tell me all about yourself." She leaned forward to pour the lemonade into Waterford glasses, with the pleasant side effect of giving me an excellent view. She asked, so I told her. Salutatorian of my high school class and president of the student council. Bachelor of Arts in Political Science summa cum laude. Top 1% in my law school class after the first year. Golfer. Music lover, everything from Baroque to jazz. I filled in some details, told her how I loved my morning runs, participated in school activities, things like that. She was a good listener. "Isn't law school expensive?" she asked. I explained I had a couple of scholarships and my aunts helped. It was a bald-faced lie, but the truth wasn't any of her business. My father and his father before him had been single children and successful lawyers. Inheritance from my grandparents and parents, life insurance proceeds, the litigation settlement, and the skillful investments by the money manager over the 14 years since they had died gave me a brokerage account containing about $12 million. The income had paid for college. I did not flaunt my money and I never would. Then I laid the last bit on her, which seemed to be more important to the women I met than it was to me. I work as a male model, too, print work primarily, for everything from autos to underwear. I've done 2 TV commercials and been in a music video, I said. That sounds like fun, she said. It is, and it pays well. I'll bet you've done some modeling yourself. I did, she said brightly. Print work, of course, and some commercials, nothing national though. I wondered if Amanda had been with another woman. From the female models I knew, I guessed she had. Beauty pageants? I asked. Why, yes. Both the Miss America and Miss USA, but I didn't win. The judges were blind, I said. Thank you, Jim. She said it in a way that proved she was used to men complimenting her appearance. But she eyed me, evaluating the depth of my interest. How long have you been Mrs. Dr. Parker? Arthur and I were married almost 2 years ago. When you were 15? I said. She laughed, a soft, sweet sound with a hint of husky undertone. Thanks again, but I was 22. Which makes you my age, I thought. She hesitated. Go on, I said. My father's a doctor. He and my mother were friends of Arthur and Jane, his first wife. I've known him all my life. When he proposed, well, he is a handsome and prosperous man, and he does know how to court a lady. Why did he and Jane break up? She had an affair, and he caught her. Something made her blush, maybe the realization of what was brewing between the two of us. Arthur is a jealous man, she said introspectively. Why did she play around? I asked. I wasn't really asking about Arthur's first wife. I was asking about his current wife. Amanda understood, but she pulled down the protective barrier we humans develop to protect ourselves and our thoughts. I don't know. Speculate, I said. I couldn't, she said, but she meant, I won't. I leaned toward her, intentionally invading her personal space. She drew back, and her mouth opened as I tapped the softness of her left chest over her heart. What's inside here? In your heart. I like my life. She hesitated. She had to know I knew she was lying. I love my husband. That's a stock answer. What's deep inside? Amanda didn't answer. She uncrossed her legs and put both feet on the floor. The muscles in her thighs tightened as if she were going to stand, but she didn't. She looked out the window, seeing something far away. I'm not stupid, you know, she said defensively. I know. I suspect you're a hell of a lot smarter than you let on. She looked at me with angry eyes. Men see my body and automatically think I don't have a brain in my head. Not me. I think smart is better than stacked any day. Excuse me, she said. She stood and walked down the hall. I heard a door close. I walked to the window to see their backyard in the daylight. It was immaculate, with all the proper plantings in all the proper places and the hot tub bubbling benignly. I heard her footsteps and turned to watch her. She had adjusted her halter, let down her hair, and freshened her makeup. More lemonade, she asked. No, thanks. Come tell me about the real you. We sat down. She started slowly, probably thinking I wasn't really interested, but I was interested, and I am a good listener. I've got a bachelor's in English and I'm working on my master's in creative writing, she began. Arthur's not too thrilled about me still being in school and grumbles about it, but he hasn't demanded I quit. Her eyes gleamed as she confided, I want to write children's books. I've got some ideas. She talked about her ideas for a book, and I interjected comments when appropriate. She talked about herself and her family and friends. She was animated and personable and warm. More than that, she could not stop talking because it had been way too long since someone had asked about her wants and her desires. When she ran down about 30 minutes later, I asked, Are you going to have children? No. Arthur made that clear before we were married. No more kids for him. She slouched back in her chair dejectedly and crossed her legs again. Her foot moved back and forth. What does the inscription on your ankle bracelet say? She stiffened. Nothing really. Oh, come on. What does it say? Her jaw set, and her eyes challenged me to think ill of her. Property of Dr. A. Parker, she said. Do you have a problem with that? No. Do you? Why did you ask? She demanded. I didn't answer. We waited and watched and took in each other with our eyes. I knew before long Mrs. Amanda Parker would be naked in my bed. And I suspected Mrs. Parker knew it, too, but there was still part of her that resisted the idea. I've enjoyed talking to you more than you know, but I need to finish the yard. Thanks for the lemonade, I said. She stood when I did and was in my arms. She initiated the kiss, her lips soft and needy. I didn't touch her. When she broke the kiss, I acted angry as I said curtly, If we start, I won't stop. Not with you. So no teasing. Understand? She nodded. Don't start unless you plan to go all the way. I turned and started for the door. She didn't follow me, so I let myself out. As I finished the front yard, I saw her watching me more than once. I half expected her to ask me to come over again, but she didn't. That was only a minor disappointment because I was looking forward to tomorrow. Monday morning, I ran early, had eggs and toast with my aunts, and saw them off to work. I went to the paint store to buy supplies and get color samples because painting the house was on the agenda they had given me. Then I stopped at the hardware store to get what I needed to overhaul the toilets and to buy a new kitchen faucet. I was digging through the refrigerator trying to decide what to have for lunch when Amanda called. Hi, Jim, she bubbled. I was going to have a sandwich and I hate to eat alone. Would you like to join me? I'll be right over, I said. As a male model, I have to work hard to stay in shape. I know the effect my naked chest with its well-defined pecs and six-pack abs has on women. I stripped off my clothes and put on a pair of gray gym shorts and nothing else. I was at her back door a minute later. She let me in, closed the door behind me, and stared at me as her hands fluttered helplessly. She was impeccably dressed in a wraparound skirt and halter top. A short gold chain was around her neck and the ankle bracelet was in place. She was perfectly attired for the wife of a socially prominent man except for her expression, which was, for lack of a better word, horny. What's for lunch? I asked with a lopsided grin, ignoring her obvious desire. Damn, but she wanted to put her hands on me, and I knew it. This wasn't her game, the kind of game she'd played all her life of teasing men and having the power to drive them mad. This time she was the one whose desire was eating her up. She stepped toward me, but I stopped her with a hand on each shoulder. I meant it. You start it, and I'll F you long and often. I want you, she moaned. All the way? Yes, damn it. All the way. We kissed hard and deep. I removed her halter. But when I found the flap holding her skirt in place and released it, letting the skirt flutter to the floor, she grabbed the skirt and ran from the room. I opened her refrigerator, found the lemonade, poured 2 glasses of it and sat at her kitchen table. 5 minutes later, she returned, not meeting my eyes as she walked with small, guilty steps to the table where she sat opposite me. I'm sorry, Jim. It's just. God, you probably think I'm a SL because I'm chasing you so shamelessly, but I was a Virg when Arthur first had me. I've been faithful to him. I've been good, but, now. I didn't speak until she stilled and raised her eyes to silently beseech me. Maroon, I said. I beg your pardon, she asked, obviously confused. Maroon, I said. Now you say it. All right. Maroon. What does it mean? Maroon can mean abandoned, left behind. That's what the good doctor has done to you, abandoned you here while he's at work or at his meetings. She nodded her agreement. And he maroons you here when he's with other women. She neither defended him nor asked how I knew there were others, giving unspoken admission that there were. Does it feel good being marooned? I asked. She shook her head, no. I stood and it pointed at her face. She stared unabashedly at it. When she raised her eyes to mine, the need was unmistakable. Maroon is a color, a deep, dark red, like the blood pumping through your veins right now, making your face flush, showing you're hot with need. I took another small step, leaving us inches apart. Had she leaned forward a little, her lips would brush the spear point. Suddenly, she panicked, slipping out of the chair to stand trembling by the kitchen counter. Her breathing was shallow, her face terrified, but her legs were parted and her hands were fisted by her side. I can't. I'm married to Arthur. I belong to him. I know, and I know how much that means to you. I'm not going to do anything to cause him to leave you. I'm not going to try to take you away from him. You'll still be Mrs. Dr. Parker. This is about you and me doing it. I could never agree to have an affair with you. Never. I stepped into her, pressing her against the counter. She made no move to stop me. You don't need to agree. Maroon has one more meaning. You can say no, or stop, or anything else, and I'll ignore it. Except maroon. Maroon is your safe word. My safe word, she mouthed. Say maroon and I will stop. I'll stop and walk away, but all other protestations will be ignored. Do you understand? I understand, she said. I grabbed her, kissing her. She softened and yielded, willingly accepting my hands. I guided her to the kitchen table and pushed her on her back. I pulled my shorts down when she gasped, maroon. Maybe I should have rammed it home, but I didn't. I'm sorry, Jim. Please. Don't leave. I'm sorry. She was saying, I'm sorry, as the door slammed behind me. Don't get me wrong. All I had to do was ignore her safe word, and I could have F her. For a lot of men, that would be enough, another notch on their belt. But I learned long ago that the thing is best when both people enjoy it. I knew Amanda Parker wanted me, and I'd bet I would have her before too long, but if I didn't, that was all right, too. It had to be for her pleasure as well as mine because, if it was, my pleasure was maximized. And there was something else, something I had never experienced with a woman. For me, it was a new and strange feeling, a protective and nurturing feeling, spouting like a kernel in my mind. The phone was ringing when I got home. I saw on the caller ID it was Amanda. I didn't pick up. It rang twice more in the next 5 minutes. I was pulling everything out from under the kitchen sink to install the new faucet when the doorbell rang. I'd been home 17 minutes. She had changed into a loose mid-thigh skirt and pullover jersey top with sandals on her feet. She wore no jewelry except the rock on her finger and the ankle bracelet, both of which testified she belonged to Dr. Parker. I said nothing as I stood in the door facing her. May I come in? She asked humbly. I stepped aside, let her enter, and closed the door behind her. I'm sorry, Jim. Very sorry. If you give me another chance, I promise I won't say maroon again. No matter what you do. Please. No, I said. Please, please. I won't disappoint either of us, she said. Go home. The next move was up to her because it was important for her to be sure. A shy, little grin crossed her face when she realized why I waited without touching her. She smiled lovingly as she crossed her arms, grabbed the hem of her top, and pulled it over her head. She stepped out of her sandals, unzipped her skirt, and let it fall to the floor. Except for Parker's ownership trinkets, she was naked. She was a woman self-trained to pose and prance and preen before men. She had strutted on runways, in beauty pageants, and made love to cameras. She knew each aspect of her body made men weak in the knees, and collectively the package could be overwhelming. But she wasn't trying to mesmerize me with her physical beauty as she stood before me. She was simply a woman who wanted a man, who had removed her clothes to make herself available to him. More importantly, she had stripped away her reserve, her protection of self, leaving her emotionally naked as well. She was needy for me. She was frightened I wouldn't respond in kind. Her need made her irresistible. When I took her hand, she squealed and tears formed in her eyes in the spilt second before she threw her arms round my neck to hug me. I held her tightly as she whispered in my ear, I want you so much I'm dying inside. I want to be your NFU forever. Come on, let's do it. Oh, God, yes, she gasped. I led her down the hall to my bedroom. She ran to the bed and threw herself down on her back. I've never seen anything like this, she said. Have you seen a lot of you know what? I asked in a smart aleck sort of way. She grinned. Not in real life, but I am intelligent enough to work a computer. I want more. I need more, she said. I lay beside her and took her in as she slept as peaceful as an angel. She was magnificent, every little part of her from the top of her head to the tips of perfect feet. I covered her over with a comforter, put on my shorts, and went out to the kitchen. I was under the sink finishing installing the sprayer when I heard Aunt Dorothy come in. She called out hello and I yelled in reply. She had a lewd grin when she joined me. "Amanda's clothes are in the hall," she said. "Where is she?" "Asleep in my bed." "Did you have fun?" I turned and showed her my back. "Good Lord, Jimmy. You look like you lost a fight with a cat. Sit on the chair and I'll clean you up." "I'll be fine," I said. "I'm the nurse. Sit down." She used her nurse's voice, the one that made patients obey without thinking. I sat on a kitchen chair facing its back. In a few moments, Aunt Dorothy was washing my wounds. I can tell she liked it. "How about you?" When I didn't answer, she said, "That good, huh?" "That good," I said. "Do you love her?" "Aunt Dorothy, I don't even like all the women I let alone love." Deflective answer, mockingly given. "I'd say you had it bad," she said quietly. We didn't talk as she finished scrubbing the wounds and applying Bactroban. I stood and stretched. "I need coffee," I said. "I'll have some, too," Amanda said. Aunt Dorothy and I both turned around to see her. She was smiling shyly, eyes bloated, wrapped in the comforter. She came to me with short little steps and buried her head in my chest. I held her there, lost in the feel of her. "I hate to break this to you," Aunt Dorothy said apologetically, "but doesn't Arthur call about 6 every night when he's out of town?" "Shit," Amanda muttered. She turned, dropped the comforter, and walked away. Aunt Dorothy watched with desire. "That's a sassy ass your women has, Jimmy." She realized what she said and hung her head in shame. In a second, Amanda returned wearing her skirt and sandals, and came to me. "Can you come over and spend the night?" she said. "Of course," I replied. "I'll order Chinese." "Say an hour?" "I'll be there." She kissed me, before slipping on her top, kissing me again and turning to Aunt Dorothy. "Good night, Dorothy," she said. "Good night," Aunt Dorothy replied. I'd seen the interchange between the two of them. Aunt Dorothy wanted Amanda and Amanda knew it. I wondered if anything had transpired between them. Aunt Dorothy was lost in thought until she looked at me and blushed. "Have you too?" I asked. She shook her head. "But you want to?" She nodded. "Has she ever?" "She told me once with another girl at a beauty contest," Aunt Dorothy answered. "Did you proposition her?" I asked. Aunt Dorothy gave me a look that could wither an iron pole. "Shut up, Jimmy." I knocked on Amanda's back door about an hour later. She answered, freshly scrubbed and cleaned, wearing little makeup and the same top and skirt she wore earlier. She ushered me in, kissed me hungrily, and led me to the table where 2 places were set and Chinese food containers crowded the center. We visited and ate. When dinner was over, we cleaned up the kitchen before she took my hand and led me to her marital bed. We cuddled until she slid her hand down. "How about taking off that ankle bracelet?" I said. It was one of those times I spoke before thinking. She sat up beside me. Her eyes burned into me. "Why?" she asked. When I didn't answer, she said, "I know I'm a woman who has a deep need to belong to a man, Jimmy. I belong to Arthur and that anklet shows it more than a ring like all married women wear." I had the urge to run to the nearest jewelry store. She smiled as if she had read my thoughts, leaned over. After that, we didn't have it for a week. She was too sore Tuesday and Arthur came home Wednesday. But from there forward, we were together as much as time and circumstances would allow, which meant we spent most every day with each other. Sometimes, we studied. Sometimes, we did it. Sometimes, we made love. Always, we talked. We talked about school and life and kids, and about politics and society and philosophy. We asked questions, and there was no lying. The questions might be funny but the situation was too serious to lie. Like the time I asked, "What are your measurements?" "I wondered when you'd ask," she said with a laugh. "You noticed I said when. Not if. So answer. 36 de 24 moins 35. How big is you?" "I don't know. You'll have to measure it." She surprised me by jumping up and going to the kitchen drawers. In a second, she returned with a soft measuring tape. "A sewing tape? I didn't know you could sew. There's a lot you don't know about me yet. Stand up." She started laughing. She was laughing so hard it was easy to drag her to the floor and tickle her until she begged for mercy. And it was easy to do it with her there? One time she asked, "How many children do you want?" 2 or 3. "How about you?" 3 or 4. "It's something that can be worked out." And there was the time I said, "There won't be a third." "What do you mean?" "You said I'm your second man. There won't be a third." She smiled in a way that made me weak in the knees. "If you were my man and I was your woman, that would be your decision, and I would abide by the decision you made." When she returned to her schoolwork, writing on a yellow legal pad with a ballpoint pen, she had a happy and self-satisfied grin. I don't know how long I watched her, taken in by her radiance even when she was doing something mundane. I went back to my work learning torts, always a dynamic subject. How about women? Her head rested on her folded hands, and her eyes sparkled. Women? You said if you were my man and I was your woman, there wouldn't be any more men. How about women? Would you like that? Maybe. How many women have there been? 2. You told Aunt Dorothy 1. I lied to her. I'm not going to lie to you. Not ever. Did you like it? Yes. Do you want to do it again? If you want me to. Ido. All right. I will. She picked up her pen, started to write, stopped, and looked up at me. Any more questions? Have you done another style? She dropped the pen and gasped, obviously shocked. I tried not to smirk. No way. But if I tell you to do it, you will. You're not my man, so I wouldn't. If I was your man. Are you serious? As a boil. Have you seen that? Seen and participated several times. They all loved it. My sweet Amanda was horrified, but I detected a glimmer of interest. I went back to my work and she watched me. I could almost see her mind whirring. Jimmy, she said softly. I stopped working. If I was your woman, I'd do whatever you told me to do. I nodded. But if you loved me, you wouldn't tell me to do something I didn't want to do. Not true. I might very well tell you to do it, particularly if I thought you secretly wanted to. I do not want to be with a dog, she said, but I wasn't convinced. How about a break? I need some coffee. And the first time I told her I loved her, it was a Friday in July, actually the 6th Friday since we'd met at her party. We were at lunch, having sandwiches at my house. We already knew we weren't going to have it that day. Arthur was taking some of his buddies and their wives to a baseball game and Amanda was scheduled to go. We had just enough time in the afternoon before he would be home and they would leave. She knew what I was going to say before I said it. I love you, I said. I know, but I can't tell you how happy I am you finally said it. I love you, too, but I've told you 1,000 times. Tell me again. I love you, Jimmy. Everything was different after that. I absolutely hated that she slept in his bed at night. Irrational? Probably. She was his wife. But, damn it, she was mine in every other way. After she left for the baseball game, I went to the jewelry store. I bought her a lovely engagement ring. It was only 1 carat, not nearly as big as the boulder Parker had given her, but it was a flawless blue-white, the most perfect kind. And I bought a bracelet for her ankle. I had it inscribed, Jimmy Johnson's loving woman. My aunts had known all along what was happening. Even if Aunt Dorothy hadn't caught us red-handed, I couldn't keep anything from them. They had been counseling me through the affair. Aunt Linda had been totally supportive, without a hint of negative input, but Aunt Dorothy gave me both sides of the issue. Over dinner that night I told my aunts I was going to ask Amanda to get a divorce and marry me, and that I was going to do it tomorrow. What will you do? Aunt Dorothy asked. March over there and confront Arthur, I said. I just hope he doesn't own a gun. He might, but he won't use it. He's too civilized for that, Aunt Dorothy said. I didn't sleep well that night. Saturday morning, I was up even earlier than usual, and I ran farther than I normally did. I needed to work off my nervous energy. When I returned to the house, my aunts were having coffee. I grabbed a cup and went to shower. I had finished dressing in a pullover knit shirt and khakis when I heard the doorbell ring. I put on my loafers, put the ring and anklet I bought for Amanda in my pocket, and went down the hall. I heard Arthur Parker's booming voice before I saw him. Their backs were to me as they marched into the living room. Amanda collapsed on the couch with Aunt Dorothy sitting by her to comfort her. Aunt Linda was perched on the couch arm beside them. The good doctor was standing by the fireplace, puffed up like a rooster and as red-faced as a lobster. He saw me and turned redder. His eyes bugged out. She is pregnant, he boomed, pointing at Amanda. I looked at her, and her expression confirmed his news. And, Parker said, taking a half step toward me, I am not the father. I had a vasectomy years ago. He locked his hands behind his back and rocked back and forth on the balls of his rockports as he looked down his nose at me with a smirk. You see, Jimmy boy, when a smart man like me has you understand what a wife, he takes protective measures. Amanda never was on the pill. I have always switched her birth control for placebos because a baby is proof positive of her adultery. An adulteress and her bastard child don't get anything. I don't know what they expected, but they all watched in silence as I took Amanda's left hand and gently removed her engagement and wedding rings. I put the engagement ring I had bought in their place. Her expression was unbelieving happiness as I knelt in front of her, removed Arthur's anklet, and fastened mine around her leg. I handed Arthur his tokens and said, talk to a lawyer Monday. The law is on her side and you F up big time in substituting her pills without her knowledge. She has you. We will be real easy to deal with as long as you act like a gentleman, which includes treating and talking about Amanda with respect. Now go play golf. We'll have her personal effects out before you get home, and the rest of what she wants out by Monday evening." He started to speak, and I put the flat of my hand gently on his chest. He jumped back and glared at me. "Remember, Arthur. She's mine and her child is mine. Don't say anything bad about them, or all hell will break loose." He swelled up like a toad, standing on tiptoe to make himself seem bigger. "Are you threatening me?" he demanded. "Yes, I am," I said. He glared at Amanda once more before huffing toward the front door. "Arthur," Amanda called sweetly. He stopped and turned toward her. In a kind and gentle voice, she said, "I tried to love you. I really did. But you treated me so shabbily and well, you are such a pig." I thought Arthur Parker was going to explode. I had a vision of flying body parts and entrails like a bad Hollywood movie, but he stormed out, slamming the door so hard it shattered the window in it. We four stood in the welcome silence as we absorbed all that had happened until Amanda held out her hand and I took it, pulling her into my arms. "How pregnant are you?" I asked. 6 weeks. It must have happened that first time we were together. She looked determined with her jaw set when she said, "I'm glad your baby is growing in me, Jimmy. I won't give it up for anything, but I didn't do it to trap you." "Give it up? I just wish I'd thought of taking your birth control pills away from you. It might have been even more fun if we'd known what we were creating." "Well, we'll leave you two alone," Aunt Linda said. But Aunt Dorothy replied, "No, we won't. We have a wedding to plan, and I want to see him on his knees proposing to her." I dropped to my knees and begged like a lovesick loon for Amanda to be my wife, once her divorce was final, of course. Amanda laughed and cried as she accepted. "All right, ladies. Amanda has never been out with me because she was married to him. Now, I want us all to go out for breakfast. Then we'll come back and start moving her from next door." Just then the doorbell rang. I answered it with the three of them peering over my shoulder. It was the Millers from across the street. "Is everything all right?" Mr. Miller asked. "Couldn't be better," I replied happily. Mrs. Miller smiled. "So Arthur finally confronted the two of you," she said. "I'd guess you two are now together," Mr. Miller said. "We're together," Amanda said, and I heard the uncontrollable love in her voice. "Wait a minute. What do you mean finally?" I asked. "He's known all along. We all have. Everyone in the neighborhood. But we were so discreet," Amanda said. "Oh, honey, your faces said it all," Mrs. Miller replied. "Don't you know you can't hide love?